Do you even know what DevOps is? Well, I think I know. Yeah, I like to think I know, but it's such a deep topic that I'm always learning more and more about it. For example, when I started at Amazon back in 2005 as a developer, I was handed one of these, a pager. And that pager was given to me because my team not only owned the design and implementation and coding of our service, but we owned the deployment and operation of it in production. That meant I had an on-call rotation along with my colleagues where I was responsible for what's going on in production and had to respond to any problems in production. Production's a complicated place, a turbulent place in any complicated system, and I was responsible for making sure that we were operating well. And turns out that was DevOps. And back in 2005, I didn't know that because, lo and behold, the term DevOps actually wasn't even invented or coined until 4 years later in 2009. So that was then, this is now. Now I'm a developer advocate with AWS, and I'm here to talk to you about DevOps, what it is, and maybe more importantly, what it isn't. And I'm really thrilled to be joined by my friend, Darko Mesaros.
Well, Seth, I am thrilled, and I've solved your problem. I bought us DevOps.
Only one?
Single unit of DevOps.
Just one.
So this is how you solve all of your DevOps problems. You buy DevOps.
What's in there? What's in the DevOps box?
It comes with serverless.
Okay, that's serverless, yeah.
A bunch of JSON.
JSON.
I think there's some YAML inside.
Any Kubernetes in there?
YAML. Oh.
You didn't get the Kubernetes package.
This version didn't come with Kubernetes. Okay. Yeah. So yes. Hi, friends. My name is Darko, and I used to be something they used to call a systems administrator. So similar to Seth, but I used to be on the other side with a screwdriver, screwing servers into racks. Fun times. I was the operations side of being the developer. I love automation. I love everything as code. And now I happen to work as a developer advocate at AWS. And Seth is hopefully going to ask me some important questions here. I don't know.
Well, you brought that box, right? And we talked about all the things in it, right? So I guess the first question is, what tools make it DevOps?
Oh, well, so you need all the DevOps tools, right? They come in this box. Ultimately, I think, tools don't make it a DevOps, right? It is not all about tools. It is more about the culture, right? The DevOps culture. It is about the practices and, of course, the tools that enable said practices and the culture.
That's so important, right? It starts with the culture. The culture drives the processes.
Right.
The processes say what needs to be done. And to do those things, then you apply the tools.
Right, exactly. The tools come to the end, right? If you implement a CI/CD pipeline, that doesn't give you DevOps, right?
Yeah, exactly. So things like CI/CD pipeline, containerization, we joked about Kubernetes, observability platforms like metrics.
Infrastructure as code.
Infrastructure as code, yeah, exactly, that's what that is. So these are all the tools you can be using, but it all comes from the culture, and we should say what the culture is, right? I talked about my example back in 2005. The culture was one of collaboration, breaking down silos. There's no silo between dev and ops, it's all one thing, and ownership. My team owned things beginning to end. There are different DevOps models. That's not the only model, but it really is about that ownership, collaboration, and shared goals. And what's the shared goal? Shared goal is customer success.
Yeah. And I mean, I used to work in teams which did anti-DevOps. Basically, we would do something completely different. We had specific ops teams and specific dev teams. What happens is developers would finish part of their application, and they would just give us the code and said, good luck, y'all. And then we would have to deploy it and maintain it and whatnot. So
yeah, I always hated that kind of model. When I worked at Microsoft, and I did work for Amazon, Microsoft, Amazon, and I was amazed. There was an entire org under a separate VP that owned Windows maintenance. So one team built Windows and said, okay, that's enough of that. Yeah. Your problem now. And another team maintained it. And there were great folks, great engineers on that team, not disparaging them, but there was a lack of ownership there. If you built it, you got to own it.
Okay. And now when it comes to these organizations or topologies, right? What kind of topologies are there?
Yeah, I said that the Amazon model is not the only one, right? The Amazon model is that we have a builder tools team, and they create a lot of great tools and platforms, continuous deployment pipelines, code repositories, things like that. And then that's global. And then also at Amazon, there's more local teams. Like I know, for instance, Search Team has its own resilience organization, and they've created a chaos engineering platform for search services. Yeah. So that's all DevOps, the builder tools, the search resilience team, building these tools so that the developers can then self-service. self-service chaos engineering, self-service continuous deployment, all those things. So that's one type of topology. I think there's a few other ones, like where you actually have a separate team called DevOps. That's a little bit dangerous if it works, right? If it works, if that team is building platforms, creating paradigms, creating templates, maybe even stamping out landing zones in the cloud, that's great. Giving the developers self-service ways to do their operations. If that team is processing tickets, receiving tickets saying, hey, stand up Kubernetes for me, hey, debug this for me, hey, figure out why this isn't working, that's not so great, right? That's a lack of ownership. That's sort of just this, anytime you're ticketing is important, right? It provides prioritization, but anytime you're ticketing, you're not operating face-to-face. You need both, right? The ticketing provides the durability, but you need to be operating with the people, working with the people.
I agree, definitely.
Yeah. So, that reminds me though, like I said, it could be a DevOps team or it could be not called DevOps team. I actually was at a conference and someone asked me, how do I get a job in DevOps? It seems so hard. I'm searching for all these things with DevOps in the title, and it just doesn't seem like there's a ton of them or they're just not accessible. Any thoughts about that?
So, one of the key things about being a DevOps engineer, and again, that term is very dangerous. Getting a job, like I saw this, like DevOps engineers are like unicorns. They do not exist. So getting a job in DevOps, and I'm using that term very loosely here, but one of the things that you need to understand is that you start treating things as APIs, right? Everything is an API call away. So automation, automation, automation. You want to automate your job away, people. But it is important for you to create these workflows that will support other teams to a common goal. So as a DevOps engineer, whatever that is, you don't have to be a developer. You just have to understand that things are automated, things should be automated, and you have to get away from manual workings. And more importantly, understand that there's no more fence between you and development.
That's so true. And I think one of the important things to keep in mind there is it's not just about the title DevOps engineer. You could be doing those things and be called an infrastructure engineer or a cloud architect, or there's so many titles, SRE, a system reliability engineer, right? There's a lot. Don't just search for the term DevOps. I mean, if you join Amazon, going back to my example, as a developer, as an SDE developer, you're going to be doing DevOps. Right? And you could, and what I mean that two ways. I mean, either you own a service like my team did and you're owning it in production, but you could be an SDE on the builder tools team. You could be an SDE on the search resilience team and building platforms that other devs are using. So when you're searching for a DevOps role, don't restrict yourself to the keyword DevOps. I mean, it should be somewhere in the description, but it's not always going to be.
Exactly. I forget, because again, not everything is labeled as DevOps. So yeah.
So I talked about siloing. Right, and you even talked about that was your experience, right? They just sort of handed it off to you. Have you seen good techniques for how you break down those silos?
I think ultimately, before even going into practical ways of taking down those silos, is taking out actually creating a common goal, right? People call this a North Star, right? A thing you're all striving to. So if me as an operations person and the other person who's a developer, we work for different goals, well then, I don't care about what you're doing. But if we're working about the same thing, that is the first step you need to do. Both teams work together towards the same outcome.
Yeah, the separate goals are important, are an interesting thing. Like a developer team could be gold on getting things into production. It's launched. Yay, it's
exactly.
launched.
Right.
And the operations team is gold on it operating well.
Yes, exactly.
If those are two separate things, you got a problem.
Exactly. And then again, and after that, if you have defined shared goals, they don't have to be the same goals, right? Like it's not maybe the development team, one of their goals is lines of code, and that's fine. But
no, I will not accept LOC as a goal. Let's get this straight. Removing code can often be better than adding code. So I just want to be on the record for that.
Number of support tickets answered.
Yeah.
So you have this common shared goal, this thing you're all leading up to. And then to achieve that goal, the only way to achieve that goal well is to work together. And to work together, this is where you start to do more practical things like eliminate obstacles, automate things so you don't have to get called in the middle of the night by the developers so you can deploy a development environment, right? Right. You create mechanisms, you create things. And this is where everybody's favorite tools come into place, right? This is where you start implementing CI/CD pipelines, code repositories, and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a post about some of these questions and right and wrong answers, and we're sharing it here. And you can see this picture here of someone shooting an arrow over the wall, right? Exactly. And I said the person on the left is the dev team overdressed for their launch, and the ops team is somewhere on the right hiding behind the target. Yeah. But the reality is that I think it's an anti-pattern that you see sometimes where management says, okay, this operations team that is normally siloed, well, you're now the DevOps team. Congratulations, you're doing DevOps.
Exactly.
And the name doesn't matter. What matters are the common goals and the collaboration and the shared responsibilities.
100% agree.
All right. All right, so also in that post, I had a couple more questions, like how do we deliver customer value faster? And I'll even share the wrong answer first. Okay. I'm going to tee you up here because I have my bad manager here talking about. Well, actually, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it.
You can, of course.
All right. There's an old Simpsons episode where Homer's working for a Bond supervillain. Okay. And he's got 3 employees, and they're all at their console working, and the supervillain's like, you're not producing fast enough. So Homer says, hey, can you guys work faster? And they're like, sure thing, boss. And then productivity goes up. Exactly. They start typing faster. So that's the wrong answer. Like, just work faster. And that may sound absurd, but I've actually worked with folks. I haven't had those managers personally, but I've mentored folks that have had managers like that. Why can't you just work faster? Sometimes they'll say, hey, skip the code review, or don't do so much testing. And these are all obviously anti-patterns, but hopefully people in our audience know that these are tinges of these things actually happen. So how do you actually deliver faster?
So, and when we talk about delivering faster, we're trying to get the value to the customer as soon as we can. Now, without, of course, skimping on value, or on the quality.
On the quality, yeah.
So there's a couple of approaches to this, right? One of the things that usually, as any engineer, right, you have this thing called a to-do list, a work in progress, right? A thing somebody comes in and just throws on your head, listen, Darko, you need to do this. And as soon as that work in progress starts growing and growing and growing, you start freaking out.
Yeah.
Like, okay, that's bad. Then you start thinking of multiple things that are just kind of like in your backlog and doesn't do anybody well. So limiting the amount of stuff in work in progress definitely helps, because again, it makes it clear for you what you need to do, and it's also a lot less overhead.
If you're working on 10 things at once, they'll get done 10 times as slowly.
Exactly.
If you're working on 2 things, you can deliver things and then move on to the next thing.
Absolutely. And now there's this concept of a shift left. Mm-hmm. Let me explain to you what shift left is.
We've been talking about that for like over 10 years, shift left, so I hope people are getting it.
I heard shift left a long time ago, and like from as a person who used to code assembly language, when I think shift left, oh, you mean like bit shifting? No. Shifting left means moving part of the responsibility, part of the, let's say, testing, back to the developer, right? Instead of you having everybody commit code and go through this strenuous process of just like wholly testing your code in a full-blown CI/CD pipeline, why don't you take some of the elements and shift them left, move them to their laptop? Let's do a security check on the code locally instead of waiting a couple of hours for it to go through a pipeline. So as much as you can, as much as it makes sense, move it to the developer or to the person writing stuff, be that code, application code, or infrastructure code, or whatever. Move it more to
I think that applies also to testing and applies to, we are talking about chaos engineering, and just for folks that don't know, chaos engineering is where you come up with a hypothesis of what will happen if this fault happens in production, how will my system respond, then you simulate that fault. The search resilience team I was talking about, Prime Video also have created frameworks around chaos testing tools to make it easier for teams to onboard. So I think that's part of shifting left and delivering faster. Code review, you can't skip it.
Nope.
But you can help with it. Like Code Guru is gonna be one way to apply machine learning to your reviews. You want the human in the loop there too, but to actually get your code reviews more efficient so you can actually deliver faster.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the use of artificial intelligence these days, right? Help you write some code, help you review the code as well with Code Guru, as you said. So much more things you can do right now that are faster and more efficient. And again, not everything should be shifted left, but think about what makes sense to shift left.
Absolutely. So you talked about that list of things to do, sometimes called a backlog, right? Okay. Right. So how do you respond to changes? Like, so Agile, I'm a big Agile advocate, talks about, responding to the customer, customer, face-to-face customer over contract negotiations, right? So how do you respond to changes? It's one of the most frustrating things for developers to be working on something and get changes and get different changes and change back. Like, any ideas of how to respond to that?
So, okay. I think one of the key things when it comes to changes is prioritization, right? Hello, friends. You've all received a request from somebody tapping on your shoulder, hey, can you do this? And you're like, oh, okay, this person approached me, I'll have to do this. You don't have to do it. Prioritize what you need to do. So make a list, check it twice, and check what you need to actually do. So prioritization is a key part of being agile, right? So
an important part about getting those priorities, about understanding what's important, is to be delivering working increments of software.
Exactly.
Right,
exactly.
And that way you could show it to your product manager, show it to your actual stakeholders, and get feedback.
Yes.
And by getting that feedback, you learn what's important, what's not, and you work with the product owner, that's a term from Scrum, to organize the backlog. And with that backlog in place, then you could show this is what's going to be delivered by approximately this date. I think that's one good way to do it.
Absolutely.
As opposed to either holding the line and saying no changes, too bad, you paid for it, this is what you're getting.
Yeah.
Or even worse, responding to every whim and every change, right? It has to go somewhere in the backlog. Not everything doesn't go to the top.
Yeah, exactly.
That way lies madness.
And again, you'll know you're doing a good job when people are mad at you.
What? Really?
Yes, because when people are mad at you, you're prioritizing. So remember that.
Some people are happy.
Some people are happy, right? Not everybody's going to be happy with you. But
No, everybody's happy because they're getting to see working software. I don't want people.
But I think that's a good important point, right? Especially in, I hate this term, but modern software development. Incremental changes are key, right? You no longer wait a year for the next release of my website, right? You just keep on iterating, keep adding new things, and as you slowly increment things, changes are much more, I would say obvious, but are much more rapidly approaching, right?
Well, that's a great point, because it's not just about getting feedback of demos, right, of these demos you're doing, but it's getting feedback from production.
Correct.
You put things in production, you're going to learn what works and what doesn't work, right?
Exactly.
So that's another thing about DevOps, is having this observability out there, and not just like logs and traces, but also user behavior. Right, and seeing what folks are clicking on, what they're responding to, and that's some of the best feedback at all, right?
Your customers are the best feedback, right?
Yeah, and as opposed to like the anti-pattern is just waiting for the customers to complain or getting bad press or something like that, right? You want to have those observability frameworks. That's why we talk about having that view of production and being able to respond to it at all levels. So I want to share on my screen for a second here that let me bring this up. Okay, so this one here. This is showing actual requests and the latency of those requests from an API used by a service at Amazon. So at the service level, this is going to tell you as a service owner, are my users, my callers, might be another service calling me, getting the latency that they need? Or are there any outliers? Are there any issues? And it's actually showing the bottom one there is the median latency. That's not as important. We like to look at percentiles, like the 99th percentile is the latency that 99% of callers are getting, that or lower. And that really gives us insight onto whether the API is meeting our latency needs. Now, at the higher level, you as a end-to-end workload, the multiple services, have some key performance indicator you're trying to hit. That's something that proxies customer success. The one I'm showing you now is actually from Amazon.com, and it's the order rate, the orders per minute. At Amazon.com, if orders drop, that's a red alarm. That's setting off flags, and people are going to be on phone calls, etc. And you can see it goes up and down throughout the day, so you need those purple bands that predict where it's supposed to be. You could be using anomaly detection, it's something offered by CloudWatch, and see, is it an anomalous drop? And if it is, you better be doing something about it.
Because remember, kids, it's not all about CPU utilization and memory usage. There's a lot of different indicators that can showcase that something is actually wrong. So introducing the appropriate metrics and observability is also a very important stage of DevOps, because you want to make the good changes, but you want to make them at the correct time.
Yeah, the CPU and memory utilization are also good ones too, though.
They're good, but they're not the only ones.
Yeah, I mean, at Amazon, every service has a dashboard, so you have multiple of these metrics, but the latency metrics are definitely letting you know what's going on with your customers.
Just the fact that, like, looking at the graph of order numbers going down, that's an anomaly, right? You detect something is not out of the ordinary, even if the other metrics don't show anything.
Yeah, so. Well, so the thing about that high-level KPI is it tells you something's wrong, but not what's wrong.
Correct.
Then you need those other service-level metrics to tell you what's wrong.
Correct.
Exactly. All right, well, this has been a great conversation with you. I want to let folks know that if they want more information, there's that post that I wrote on Succeeding with DevOps, Wrong Answers Only. That's a good one. We're going to include that in the show notes. There's also another one on DevOps Essentials I want you to check out. And the nice thing about the DevOps Essentials, it gives you the big end-to-end, but at the end there's a list of links that I think also give you a lot of great information there. And yeah, so well, I guess the other one, we talked about the DevOps roles. One of our colleagues posted on LinkedIn about what the different types of DevOps roles there are in their name, so we'll include a link to that also.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, absolutely. There's so much thing to read about when it comes to DevOps, but just don't be pigeonholed into a single type of role. It's a multiple type of roles. It's a multiple things you need to do, but and it's not all called the same. So
but all deriving from that DevOps culture.
Exactly.
If it's about collaboration, breaking down silos, working together, ownership, then you're on the right path.
Yeah, and let us know in the chat, just below the like button. You can tell us your own DevOps horror stories or not horror stories. We would definitely love to hear them.
You say there's a like button there?
Yes.
They should probably hit
like
that.
and subscribe.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Darko.
Thank you, Seth.
All right. Well, thanks for watching that video. If you liked it, click the like button. Also click subscribe and be sure to click that bell so you never miss another video from the Build on AWS channel.